Well, welcome to the Real Journeys of Success podcast. And as you know, my name's Rob Elliott, your host. Today, we have a very special man from Melbourne, Victoria in Australia, Mr. Phillipe Guichard. He is an international award-winning industrial designer. He has a passion for engineering and he loves turning concepts and ideas into innovative products. Welcome to the podcast, mate. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Hi, Robert. Really nice meeting you today.
Mate, that's great. Now, anyone from Australia will be listening to you and around the world, they're going, that's not an Aussie accent. Where are you from, mate?
Not quite the Aussie accent, indeed. Yeah, I was born in France. I moved a lot when I was in France. I moved more than 30 times before I was 30, I guess.
Yep.
So I went to plenty of different schools. Every year, every second year, we moved from one to the other or one city to the other.
Yep.
But I spent most of my professional life in the Alps. So I started to work in Paris and then just didn't like it. That was too gray for me and too, I don't know, sad, I guess.
Yes.
So I went to live in the Alps. It's the second economic region in France.
Yes.
It's very dynamic. There are a lot of manufacturing and companies, and it's close to Italy and Switzerland. And so it's a great place to be. And you're in nature. And, so I was living in the Alps. You have the mountains with the snow, the lake. So that was a nice place to work.
Okay. So where did you study?
I study a bit in France and a bit in Europe too, and in Canada. I've been one of those students that was blessed to be part of a European program where you could have exchange between different universities or cities. So
Yes.
I've been studying a bit in Germany and UK.
Yes.
But I study industrial design in Canada, and that was one of those big moments and those big revelations for me.
Yes.
And I still have very dear friends in Canada, and every now and then when I can, I travel over there to visit my friends.
Yes.
And after Canada, I moved back to France and started my first design studio.
So when you were at university, were you better at the academics or the social side?
Oh, that's interesting. I was pretty shy at the time, so I would say maybe better at the academics.
Yeah.
Especially because when it comes to design, I really thought or felt that was a real passion for me. So to give you a bit of background around that, it all started with the first trigger when I was 16.
Yes.
Both my parents are engineers, and they wanted me also to become an engineer. And I was on a path of becoming a mechanical engineer. But I was one of those disengaged students at the back of the classroom, disrupting a bit the classroom and the colleagues.
Yep.
And I was the B- students. So I was doing okay, but I could do so much better. Not that I was dumb. I thought I was just disengaged and not really interested in all the curriculum. And my parents, being engineers, and they wanted me to succeed, they thought that B- would not quite fit to enter the highest engineering schools in France.
Yes.
So they had me take a career counselor test.
Yes.
And long story short, the test came back, the career counselor told me, well, you're not going to amount to anything. You're never going to have your baccalaureate. Forget about university. It's impossible for you. You don't have the brain for it.
Yeah.
Maybe what you could do, the best you could do is to do something with your hands, maybe a cabinet maker. And if you're at the top of your game, maybe you can do a violin one day or something like this.
Yes.
And I was like, I love working with my hands. Don't get me wrong. I love the art. I love the craft and everything. But I thought, well, that's not quite me. And what happened is that I had a spectrum of skills and interests that were all over the place. And 2 years later, I was throwing a party. I was studying mechanical engineering. I was throwing a party at my place. And one of the ladies invited her boyfriend, who was an industrial designer.
Yes.
I never heard the term before. I had no idea what it was, but because I'm visual and I have some visual imagination, industrial design, I thought, well, it's probably someone who chooses or picks the colors of the pipes in the industrial facility. So I was cracking jokes on the poor guy all evening and making fun of how useless his job was.
Yeah.
But at the end of the evening, I just came and said, okay, apologies for the bad jokes, but what is industrial design? And his answer was, well, actually, I'm the CEO of a design studio here. So how about you come along and I'll show you?
Yeah.
And there are moments in your life when you have to pay attention, your brain's on fire, your guts tell you, hey, there's something happening here.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of those moments. So to come back to your point being at the universities, because design was such a passion for me or such a good fit,
Yes.
I did socialize, but I spent a lot of time studying and having the good grades and everything.
Was there any one person when you were growing up or while you were in uni that you can look back and say that that person was an inspiration to me?
It's very interesting. I had a question before and I've been reflecting on that.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not too sure because my family, we don't have a lot of creatives in my family. I think I'm probably maybe the only one. So I'm a bit of a black sheep because, they're all in engineering or marketing and sales or being a doctor. So,
Yep.
a creative in that environment is not the best fit. This being said, my grandpa, he moved from Germany to France and he learned French by going to the cinema and being a salesman for all things. So having to talk to people without knowing the language. So he had, in retrospect, I think he had a lot of entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
And you need some creativity into that.
Yes.
And also he had an appreciation for beauty. So the end of his life, he wasn't wealthy, but he was very comfortable. And he could buy designer stuff like those beautiful lamps, those beautiful hi-fi systems like the Lewy or whatever. So very sleek design and there was art, and so like real beautiful pieces of art, not the cheap stuff, like a really significant investment in art and design. And I think that may have shaped me at the time. It's like, wow, you can do this stuff, you can sell that, you can create that. So I think it did have an influence on me when I was a teenager.
So probably using a term from today, he was a bit of a disruptor. He didn't think like a normal person. He liked to think outside the box.
I think he did. I think at first that was probably by necessity. But after, when comfort came, I think he could enjoy the benefit of that curiosity.
Yeah. So you've done uni and you've learned about this new way of designing, and which is more than just lines on a piece of paper on a computer these days.
Yeah.
So how did you get from there to where you are today? I mean, you are one of the country's leading people in your genre. But there's not many people that have achieved what you've achieved, and you do rattle the cage in a really, really good way, as we would say, using a sales terminology. How did you get from there to being the leader of your own business to being the leader of what you're doing?
I think it came in stages. So the first discovery is when I was 22 and I started my business.
Yes.
I realized very quickly that having understanding of mechanical engineer and being an industrial designer was definitely a point of difference.
Yes.
So what it meant is that when I was designing for my clients, I would understand how to manufacture. So I would incorporate that knowledge into the design itself. And you probably heard of stories of designers. There are plenty of there where they did something that looks beautiful, but it's impossible to manufacture. And it's so expensive that no one can afford the product. And I had those stories. I remember when I was 22, I visited one of the companies I wanted to work for, and the CEO was waiting for me, like really. So I arrived for the appointment and said, okay, come with me, I'll show you something. So we go into the warehouse. He said, okay, this is a mold that's been created by a designer that never worked. It's tens of thousands of dollars that you guys wasted. I said, yeah, that's his, but I'm different. I understand what a mold is. I understand draft, I understand injection molding and everything. So I bet we can do something together.
Yes.
So that gave me an edge. But I also realized very quickly that working, especially with entrepreneurs and small to medium companies, that there were two things missing from what I studied. One is marketing and the other is business model.
Yes.
And that's something that I integrated in my methodology from the very early days, and I've been polishing that methodology ever since. But the idea is like you design a product for a specific market, a specific experience. And even though that could be a good fit, doesn't mean that you have a business. So you need to run the numbers. And if the numbers don't add up, you go back to your drawing board. It doesn't mean that the idea is bad. It means that the execution you had is not ideal for the market and their purchasing power and everything. So you look those three major points. It's more complex than that when you dive into it. But roughly, design, marketing, business model, you loop into those three and you circle that around a few times, and then you arrive to a product that has more chances to be successful.
So if you look at it in today's terms, we'll look at it, we call it pre-COVID, as we call it. Was it easier to bring a product or a concept to market before COVID or after?
I think there is a difference with COVID, and the difference resides in an additional tool that was there before,
Yes.
which is e-commerce.
Yes.
And so I've designed in last year, I've designed a product for retail.
Yes.
COVID hits, and I realized that my product is good for retail, that would work, and at the same time is not good for e-commerce.
Right.
Because it has plenty of quality, but it's a bit bulky. It's light but bulky. So it doesn't go into an envelope, it goes into a parcel, and that, shipping costs are a bit higher because of that. So I need to twist that idea so that I can have the best of the two worlds. So I think that's one of the major change or correction that I've seen with COVID. You cannot rely on one or the other only. You cannot rely on e-commerce only because you don't know, the rules can change. Facebook can do something different.
Yes.
Apple is releasing a new OS and is going to disrupt the ad industry. And so you have all that happening. So you cannot rely on one thread only, but you need to have both. In order to have both, that has impact on the design itself.
Do you think now that COVID's hit and we hopefully in Australia coming out of it now, and the rest of the world will be a fair few months behind us from what we can see, do you think it's exposed the designers, the engineers, and the management of many companies of people that can't change or choose not to change?
I think so, yes. I think that the bigger difference that I've seen during the COVID time is the mindset.
Yes.
It kind of makes or breaks people, I would say. And we all have different circumstances that make our project or product or venture a bit more difficult because of COVID or not. At the same time, if you have the mindset of, well, this is actually more an opportunity, what can we do, what can we change? Then you're much more likely to succeed. So when COVID hit in Australia, I've lost a fair bit of my project in probably like in 48 hours. So that was a bit of, oh, what's going on? But at the same time, I thought, well, that's also an opportunity because I can really talk to people that will see, the entrepreneur that will see that this is a major disruption or a major shift. Therefore, there are new opportunities. And that's where I need to focus.
Yes.
And just a few weeks after, I was signing a number of clients because of that mindset shift. I think it's the same for other employees, other designers, other entrepreneurs and everything. I had entrepreneurs that, in my mind, had a promising market, and they dropped their project altogether because they were in a fear mode or in a fear environment because of the arrival of COVID and the pandemic in Australia. At the same time, I signed an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, that asked me to work for a device in the travel industry. And you would think, well, that's dead. And actually, my thinking was, well, this is fantastic because it takes a bit of time to design a product.
Yes.
So in those 9 months, 10 months, or 12, I don't really know, we're going to design and refine a product to the best of our ability so that we make sure that all those three items are, well positioned. And then the market will be different in 12 months. Like people who will travel or fly will have a different feel or experience or expectation from that. And because we have our pulse on the market, then we know exactly how to address those people. The second thing is that very few people will invest in the travel industry and do new products. So we'll be probably one of the few, if not maybe the only one, that will come up in the next few weeks with a new product in the travel industry.
I was speaking to a couple of guys the other week at a breakfast I was at, and both in the same industry. One was doing gangbusters, one was complaining about COVID. And like I do sales training as well. And I just said to him, well, look, what are you focusing on? You can either focus on the past or you can focus on what's happening. I said, he's focusing on tomorrow. You're focusing on what happened 12 months ago. And he sort of looked at me ashen-faced as if to say, I don't really want to agree with you, but I have no choice. And it's so true. It's so true. So when someone comes to you now and they have a new product,
Yep.
what are the three most important things they need to look at before they go to launch and to make it successful in a post-COVID world?
One of the things is that I look at is what I call execution. So, which means you can have a good idea or a good concept, but the way you executed that idea may not be ideal.
Yeah.
And very often people have an idea, they do something with it, a prototype, and then they think, well, that's good enough. And then they continue, they carry on.
Yes.
And they never question, is that the best execution possible? Or, and there's a point of really diving into that world so that you have the most simple product in terms of mass manufacturing,
Yes.
in terms of usage, some intuition, like, you see the product, you just know how it works. Few people do that very well. And there is a point of having that type of product. It makes really a big difference in the marketplace.
Right.
The second thing is the market fit. I don't know what's the term, but I'm still baffled by the number of entrepreneurs I see that never ever talk to the market.
Really?
Yeah, and I find that scary. So I had the example, I'm not going to put any name, but someone that invested about $2 million in their venture, and they never engage with the marketplace. They never ask, is that a problem that you have? Would you be interested in? If a product were to do this, would you, at that price point, would you buy it? All those questions that you want to ask at some point.
Yeah.
They never do.
Is that from a sense of arrogance, do you think?
I don't see that this way. The way I see it is when an entrepreneur has an idea and start working on it, they have this very strong emotional attachment.
Yes.
And sometimes they can't take any feedback, or they can't step back because of that. It's like, it's my baby, and they want to take care of it and let it grow, and they completely forget about the world around. And especially with COVID, like, the world has changed and will continue to change. The landscape we had a year ago will be very different from what we'll have in a year or two time. It's going to be very, very different. So the market fit. And the third one is, again, is the business model.
Yes.
You'll be also very impressed to see how few really run the numbers.
Really?
And it's not just, some do, but they forget, like, big things, like they have the cost of manufacturing, and they put a bit of a margin, and then they think they're good to go. It's like, okay, what are your marketing costs? Yeah. Oh, don't worry, I'll go out there, it's going to sell like, hotcakes. Like, oh, okay, you could be the exception, but, in general, you have some form of marketing cost. You have a cost of acquisition, and usually it's around that. And if you have a percentage, well, it's more than a profit margin. So very quickly you realize that they don't have a business.
So there's a term that's used quite flippantly around industry called triple bottom line. But if you ask any accountant, any entrepreneur, anyone, you never ever get the same answer. They just like to rattle it off. What's triple bottom line to you?
So the triple bottom line to me is based on my personal journey and experience.
Yeah.
So what happened, I think I mentioned that I had this dual degree, and I could execute very well and design products that would make money. So I had one thing covered, which is making money.
Yeah.
I also realized that I had this kind of a passion for sustainability. And I was questioning my clients, like, okay, what do we do for that?
Yeah.
And at the beginning, there were hard discussions. But eventually, I've been able to design products that were financially successful.
Yeah.
That would really know and impact the environment in a certain way that was manageable. So that was kind of a win, except that in that case too, I realized that the social impact, which is, for me, the way you treat people in the ecosystem of the product. So that could be your employee, your suppliers, the supply chain, the second tier supplier, the third tier suppliers, all the ecosystem that is around that.
Yes.
Some had business practices that were, I'm not sure what word I can say publicly, but not the best of practices.
Know what you're saying, yeah.
And I thought, well, if you just make the money for yourself and just try to suck up as much as possible, it's not a very viable long-term venture. Like people just don't want to work with you. It's, you win today and 2 years down the track, they say, well, we had a better offer for another product and those will be on our shelves now. And that happens, you've been in the game long enough, it does happen.
Yeah.
So the triple bottom line for me is people, planet, and profit.
Yeah.
And it's important. It's not one is more than the other. It has to be a balance. And the balance is different from every venture, every business, and everything.
Yeah. Has there been, without mentioning any names, has there been an entrepreneur or business person that's come to you and that you've worked with that's truly inspired you, and what set him out or her different from your other customers?
I think there are a few. Maybe one I will mention is a young entrepreneur from Melbourne called Luke. His brand is called Into Carry, and he's designing backpack and bags and everything from waste.
Yeah.
And the whole design is based on how can you use waste and upcycle that in a very clever way.
Yeah.
And the whole design is based on simplicity, manufacturing simplicity, and the fact that it's going to be manufactured here in Melbourne.
Awesome.
So that's one example. There's another example. I haven't worked with that company, but it's a friend called Michael from Apparel.
Yes.
And they do this subscription for socks. And then you send your sock back, and then they take it back, and then they recycle it, and then they make new socks with it. So it's kind of a virtuous cycle. And they also have a focus on the circular economy and the triple bottom line. So that's two examples I have in mind.
Awesome. So if people are watching this and listening to this podcast and they're thinking of bringing a product to line, especially in your genre of mechanical engineering or something like that, what is going to be the most important thing they're going to have to tick off, let's say, before they come and see someone like you? What should they be concentrating on post-COVID, considering we really don't know what the end of the year is going to look like?
That's true. So for me, what's important is not so much how advanced you are on your idea and everything.
Yeah.
I started working with entrepreneurs at the point where they just barely had an idea.
Yeah.
So the question that they called me, and the question was, what if we do a product that will have that type of material and would do this? Is that possible? And it's like, let's find out. So the idea could be at extremely early stage, and we have a pilot procedure to screen that and see where we can go and how we can impact their venture. For me, the qualities of an entrepreneur that I'm seeking is more maybe being a serial entrepreneur, someone that's been there before, because they have a different understanding of business and they've been there, done that, and that's a quality of tenacity and grit that I like to see. And the other is something about trust and transparency and being like very, I would say, blunt or very direct in communication. Doesn't mean that you need to be harsh or anything, but it's just having that very direct communication, because if we have that, I can take that on board, and then I can update the design and make sure that we go along and we continue this in the same direction.
Yeah, I've noticed honesty, a lot of people can take two ways with that direct type of feedback and all that. And a lot of them don't know, especially the younger generation, quite often take honesty the wrong way rather than constructive criticism or a suggestion. Do you see that has changed now during COVID? The people's mindset when it comes to doing business, there's not as much fluff and bubble anymore. They're working from home. They're more to the point, and it's getting business done a lot easier and a lot quicker.
I think for some, yes. Others, not quite.
That's cool.
But for some, definitely, I had really good conversations and very direct conversations with some of my clients. I'm currently working with another serial entrepreneur, and we have meeting that last 20 minutes. It's just, okay, this is the outcome, boom, boom. What do you like? I don't like this. We need to go there. Okay, fine.
We all worked with those type of people.
Yeah, and I don't have any issue with radical honesty or, if the intention is not to harm and be smart or anything, you can sense that, if the person wants to be smart. I've been there, I've seen a few like that, it's different. But if the person is like, they are busy, then, they're very often serial entrepreneurs, so they run another business, or so they need to go to the point. But the intention is that the venture and the project has to move forward in the best possible way. And you cannot say, oh, maybe I like it, but when you don't, because 3 months down the track, that will show up and that will be a very ugly conversation. So it's better to know that up front, and then I can course correct. I got no emotional attachment to my own work. I'm here to iterate and create so that my client is happy with what I can bring on the table.
Yeah, one of the most important things we teach people in sales is just be you, because people can smell a fake very, very quickly.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Now, you're probably ahead of a lot of the innovation that's going around, and you're seeing it in the industries and that are changing far before the public and the market see it. Where do you see the biggest advancements coming in industry now in the next couple of years?
This is
design? Is it in manufacturing? Is it in
I think there's a lot happening in manufacturing, and it's related to design. So there are a couple of things that will happen. I think there are sensors and what they call manufacturing 4.0, 5.0, depending on which school you follow. But there will be information from the manufacturing plants and the processes that will be very useful, which means that we can integrate that at the design stage.
Yep.
But there are also other things, like I'm really watching closely what's happening with 3D printing. And 3D printing didn't get the buzz it should have like a few years ago. We heard that everywhere 3 or 4 years ago, like, yeah, you need to buy a 3D printer. That was way too early.
Yes.
And the barrier at that time is not so much a 3D printer, is that the barrier was the CAD, which is the how do you shape anything?
Yeah.
And you need to be a specialist. Like, I got training in CAD and everything, and there are apps today where you can do things, but it's still a heavy requirement. It's like, you need to learn to write in 3D. So it's not that easy. I think that the biggest shift will happen when we do augmented reality, and then we can shape products. And we could even do that together in augmented reality. Like we could have some kind of a virtual clay, and we shape that clay and do a product, and then I can send that to the 3D printer. And then that would be very interesting in terms of development and co-design, I guess.
I listened to a recording the other week of someone booking a hairdresser, and all they said was a sales call. They said, listen to this. And we listened to them. Then they came back and said, what did you think of that? And everyone gave their, and no one knew that the person taking the order was a computer.
Yeah.
They had the voice, they had everything down pat. And I thought, wow, if that's what they've done already in that, as you just said, the augmented reality and everything else, it's not that far away.
I think it's not that far away. The key is to make that super simple and intuitive for people.
Yes.
And I have to confess that some of the tech people doing that are not the best in connecting with that level of intuition and simplicity.
Yes.
But eventually we'll get there.
We've all seen in the sales side what happens when an analyst gets hold of a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And we just like it simple, straight to the point, and they make it, unbelievable.
Yeah.
So if you're looking back now and you run into yourself as a 20-year-old on the Champs-Élysées, what would you tell yourself? What would have been your biggest lesson you learned that you wish you knew when you were 20?
There are so many.
One thing you can stay online.
So many. I think probably something along the lines of trust yourself.
Yeah.
Like, you got this. It's like, because you face a lot of naysayers in your career, like it cannot be done. Like I'll jump back a tiny bit. When I started talking about sustainability 8 years ago, the people were mocking me and everything. It's like, who are you? There's no use. We don't have time. I'm here to make money. That's the type of answer. But one of the most profitable product I've designed is designed with a sustainability methodology.
Yes. Because
you can have the best of the two worlds. There's no opposition between one and the other. You can have a highly financially successful product that doesn't damage the environment. And so mindset, definitely. I I could tell that myself, which is related to, you've got this.
Yes. Awesome. Now, for those of you who were listening at the start, you do live in Melbourne,
Yeah.
which is in Victoria, Australia. It's got a river that goes through it, and right next to that river is some of the finest restaurants in Australia.
Mm.
If I could book you a table for 4 and I said, Phillipe, bring 3 people, anyone you know, anyone alive or dead that you'd like to have lunch with over a nice Australian steak and a red wine, who would it be?
That's a very good question. And I would need maybe a bit more time to think about it. But from the top of my head, I would probably answer my 2 grandfathers.
Really?
Yeah. They had life stories and wisdom that I didn't have time, because I was too young when they died.
Yes.
I didn't have time to understand, appreciate, and contemplate on.
Guilty there myself.
And they were, frankly, they were 2 extraordinary figures, really. I was very blessed to have 2 beautiful grandfathers and grandmothers, and my family, and there's these values and stuff like that been carried, But having conversation, like being 50 and having conversation around a good meal, especially with those 2, though, I think that would be like such an amazing conversation. We probably end up at 5 a.m. in the morning. Like it's, yeah. Then after that, I'll probably add someone like Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
Because it's a story of resilience.
Yes.
It's a story of being human. It's a story of love in some ways. Like there's no resentment in the action he took when he was in power. He could have done things that he didn't do, because he has forgiveness. He had a bigger heart. And I'm not saying everything he did was perfect and ideal, but that's not the point. The point is he spent a lot of time in a position where he was supposed to be broken by this system, and he didn't.
Yeah.
And there's something about the resilience and how you can turn into being a better human being after that experience that didn't break you, but revealed you like a diamond, actually.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be also like a very beautiful and long also conversation.
Oh, mate, that's awesome.
And the 4th, I'm not too sure. I would like to include a woman, but I'm not too sure.
You include one, you're going to offend another.
That's probably, yeah. There's I like meditation. So there's a woman that I read a few of her books called Pema Chodron. She was a Buddhist nun. She has a wealth of wisdom. And I remember years ago when I was reading her books, and it felt like this kind of warm, cozy blanket of love surrounding you as you read that. It's like, how do you do that? Like there's some warmth in this, and there's a difference between the love of a mother and the love of a father. It's different type of energy.
True.
And she has this kind of very beautiful feminine energy, and I think that would be really interesting. And she's a bit old, so she has a lot of life experience. She's seen a lot, and I think that would be a beautiful conversation too.
So what is it? I hear so many leaders around the world, it doesn't matter whatever genre, talk about the value of meditation.
Yeah.
What is it about meditation that you think people like yourself and other leaders around the world are drawn to?
So for me, there are many, many types of meditations, and especially in the West now, we have like scientific meditations and stuff like that. And I'm not necessarily a big fan of that, because I find that very transactional. And by nature, transactional meditation is doomed to fail. That's really how I think.
Yeah.
My view on meditation, the principle of meditation is awakening, which is knowing your ego so well that your ego dissolves, or it so well that it doesn't bother you anymore, which means that your ego is not there. Your sense of self is 100% there.
Yeah.
And what you're meant to do in this planet then just reveals, and then you can really act out there.
Yeah.
So that's my views on meditation, and I meditate every day, every single day. I haven't missed a day in like maybe 10 years or something. It's just part of who I am. For me, it's probably the best way to know yourself.
May I ask how long you meditate for?
It depends. the average will be around 45 to 60 minutes a day. But there are days it could be more. If I have a bit more time, I can go to 2 to 3 hours.
Wow.
If I'm really, really busy, then I need to go down to 5 because there are things happening. But I always take some time to meditate. And so the point for me is like, if you know yourself so well, if you know your mind so well, then you know everyone's mind.
Yes.
Because our minds are very similar in many, many ways. We don't have that much difference between individuals.
No.
We all love, we all hate, we all, have jealousy and greed, and we all have that. But the way we deal with those emotions is different. And when you understand that at the root, at the core, then you can really relate to other people. And that's what I find beautiful with meditation. It makes you more human.
So if people wanted to find out more about who you are and what you do and what your business is, where do they find you on the web, or is it, how do they get in touch with you?
One of the most simple ways to go on LinkedIn, you type my name and then you find me on LinkedIn.
Yes.
It's a very good way to connect with me.
Yep.
I have a website, d2melbourne.com.au, where you can also book an appointment if you have an idea or if you just want to have a good chat.
Yes.
And probably find me on social media too, like Instagram, Twitter, and all those. But LinkedIn and my website would be the...
Well, for all those listening, I will put all those links up on the web, on the show notes as we get going. Phillipe, it has been an absolute pleasure listening to you today. I love what you do. I love that you back yourself, as you say, and you challenge everything that's going on. You deliver products, especially now that you're doing some that are going to be made in Australia. This will go around the world. So I encourage everyone to pop onto those websites, have a look, and as we say, have a groovy day. Thank you very much, Phillipe.
Thank you, Robert. It's been a